That sounds like a refreshing water commercial. All right. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I'm going to call to order the Monday, February 10th, 2025 Royal Oak City Commission meeting to order. We're going to begin with an invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I ask that you stand if you can, please. We gather here tonight in service to our beloved community. We ask for the wisdom, patience, and empathy needed to resolve the matters in front of us. We are grateful to live in a city that is rich in character, plentiful with opportunity, and comfortably safe. We recognize that the foundation of our success is not in our similarities, rather in the diversity of voices that inform our work. As we bring more viewpoints to the table, we achieve greater success and raise our standards accordingly. We acknowledge that success isn't because of a few, but through the equitable contributions of many unique people. By actively seeking out to include other perspectives, we broaden our knowledge and uncover new truths that raise outcomes for the collective. We are thankful for all the people who serve the city of Royal Oak, our dedicated employees, volunteers, and those who take time to participate in making our city one of the best places to call home. We pray for the less fortunate that they may find health, warmth, shelter, and nourishment during these difficult times. We ask for the safe return home of all those who serve our city, both in uniform and not. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that brings us to item 4, which is the approval of tonight's agenda. We have a motion. We have a motion by Commissioner Hunt. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion on tonight's agenda. All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. All right, that brings us to item 5, which is public comment for tonight. Just a few ground rules before we commence. The City Commission values and relies on the input of our fellow citizens to help make decisions. Now's the time set aside for the public to address the City Commission on any city-related issue, whether or not it's on the agenda. I ask that comments be directed to the Commission as a whole and not to individual commissioners. The city has made it easier for you to request follow-up on an issue. Simply scan the QR code you see displayed or sign in with staff in the lobby at the meeting tonight before speaking at public comment. So if you want to use the QR, great. If not, we have our wonderful, amazing Ms. Davids here to take your information so we can get back to you. Unless, of course, the questions are rhetorical, then just let us know they're rhetorical. If you wish to speak tonight at public comment, please wait until you're recognized by me, the mayor. You'll come up to the podium. For the record, you'll state your name and address. Please be mindful that we want to hear from anyone who wishes to speak tonight, so comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, not per topic. And we have a timer at the podium to help you keep track of your time. If you don't wish to speak tonight, no problem. You can leave your question and information with the QR. You can leave it with Ms. Davids, or you can email us ahead of the meeting or after the meeting, and we're happy to respond accordingly. Please note that the City Commission doesn't directly respond to questions during public comment. However, we are taking notes and will address questions when the agenda topic is discussed, or refer it to the proper city department if the matter is not scheduled for the agenda. Staff are also taking notes and will look into matters as needed. Any public comments the city commissioner or manager respond to post-meeting will utilize the contact information on the public comment sign-in. Please make sure to do a double check your information for accuracy. So we're trying to make sure we have a lot of different avenues for all types of people, whatever your preference is, in order to make sure we can get back to you when you have questions or concerns. All right, with that, who's first tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening to the council. Good evening to the city manager and all of the other people in this wonderful place. My name is PG. My address is P.O. Box 155, Southfield, Michigan, 48037-0155. That's where I get all of my bills, and that's the address that I use. I'm coming before this commission, or if you call yourself commission, I thought you were council, to just remind all of you that the citizens are at the top of the organizational chart. And anytime you're doing something like a master plan, you have to keep the citizens who are at the top of the organizational chart and also your taxpayers in mind when you make those decisions. And I know you're coming up on doing something with your master plan, but I want to talk about something that's going to be in this very chambers tomorrow, and that is the Sheets initiative and rezoning that may or may not take place. In several communities, they have turned down the Sheets gas station because the Sheets gas stations are truck stops. They're not conducive in neighborhoods, the 24-hour aspect, the drive-through, the beer, liquor, and wine, and a whole lot of other things that you guys already know. And the people don't want that in their neighborhood. I want to ask a question. Is it appropriate for any elected official to be considered a paid consultant with and for Sheets? And do any of you know of such a thing being possible, that an elected official can also be an advocate for a business that they don't represent and act like a lobbyist? So I'm going to be here tomorrow for your Brownfield meeting at 6. I'm going to also be here for your meeting at 7. And I just want to give you guys something to think about. Robert Gibbs, who's one of the most notable planners in the world, said that just because a business is zoned for a particular area, if it does not match the character to that area, the city is under no obligation to approve that particular initiative. So keep that in mind for tomorrow, and I'll see you then. And it's beautiful in here. This is my first time here. Thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Yes, sir.
I'll try to be brief. My name is Patrick McGee, 4524 Elmhurst Avenue. I'm here to talk to you guys about item 7 on your agenda, Normandy Oaks 25 miles an hour proposal to go to 30 miles an hour. I'm very much against this for a multitude of reasons and a multitude of facts, but I'm just going to keep it really short. I wish that you guys look at different alternatives to raising the speed. I would encourage you guys to look at more traffic calming, as well as maybe other deterrents you guys can implement on Normandy to help reduce the speed, as it is a park. And there are many pedestrians in that area, and I think going to 30 miles an hour is a bad decision that this city commission should reject and propose an alternate solution. Thank you.
All right, anybody else tonight? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is James Kenny, 123 Normandy. So same topic as my neighbor there. I'm opposed to raising the speed limit on that section of Normandy in consideration this evening. Again, I'll keep it pretty quick. I just want to read a quick snippet from the IIHS, so International Institute of Highway Safety. So raising speed limits leads to more deaths. People often drive faster than the speed limit, and if the limit is raised, they will go faster still. Again, live in a residential area. This is Normandy. There's plenty of families, kids, children, especially Normandy Oaks, again, in opposition of raising the speed limit. And I would greatly appreciate it if the city would consider other methods to, again, maintaining the speed at 25 and possibly implementing speed calming measures as well. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mary Pruno. I live at 810 Normandy, across the street from the woods. My concern too is with the increase in the proposed increase in the speed limit between Crooks and Coolidge. I don't think it's a good step on a road that has had a history and continues to have frequent episodes of people speeding and sometimes speeding at very high speeds. Thank you.
Thank you. Hand in the back.
Good evening, City Commissioners. My name is David Straub, 4218 Manor Avenue. I've been a resident of Manor Avenue just off of Normandy Road since 2014. And I'm also here tonight to express my strong opposition to the speed limit increase on Normandy Road. As a frequent driver and pedestrian on Normandy, I see firsthand how this road is used. It's a key route to the beautiful Normandy Oaks Park, a place where families, walkers, and cyclists should feel safe. I have an 8-month-old son, and I regularly take him on walks around the park. I want him to grow up in a neighborhood where he can safely walk and bike, not one where increased speeds make our roads more dangerous. Normandy Road also lacks dedicated bike lanes, relying instead on sharrows, which offer relatively little protection. As someone who drives and walks Normandy regularly, I've noticed that the parking lanes, while making the road feel wider, are often entirely unused. If we're concerned about speeds, perhaps a better approach would be repurposing some of that width for a dedicated bike lane or further traffic calming measures, rather than raising the speed limit. I urge you to reconsider this proposal and prioritize the safety of all road users, drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians alike. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. Mr. Stugler.
Last month, I talked about page 36 in the master plan.
You just get your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bob Stuglin, 4404 Rochester Road, Royal Oak. In the master plan, on page 36, there's 2 pictures. There's an aerial picture of all the businesses just south of 13 Mile on Rochester Road, the first 3 blocks. There's an allergy asthma clinic. There's a physical therapy center. There's a fire station, Top Tech Auto, busy party store, and an abandoned gas station. Across the street, the other side of Rochester, there's a family-owned appliance sales and repair store, a dental office, a Dairy Queen, computer repair shop, an empty former doctor's office, a house on the corner, construction company office, a Baptist church, and an indoor archery range. Your rendering for the future, every one of those 15 businesses is gone. The church is gone, the party store that people can walk to, the busy party store, the Dairy Queen, Top Tech Auto that's always busy. You say in this book, you don't want to change the character of the neighborhood. I wonder what the people on Lawrence Street, Bloomfield, and LaSalle would think about this picture. I doubt that they even know about it. My opinion is about this is your Project 25. It's out there, but it's not out there. Everyone should have a copy of this. Everyone, but they don't. I'm going to make sure these people on the street know about this. I went to every one of these businesses, showed them this. I had them make copies of it. They were unaware of it and shocked and disgusted. So that's that. The other thing I want to comment on, have you guys, this commission, asked the people on Normandy, asked the people in Catalpa, asked the people in Gardenia what they think of raising the speed limit? Does that ever come into play? Does it? Does it?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Strickland. Who's next? Going once. Ms. Poprovsky had the, right eye, left eye. Sometimes they cross. I saw a motion out of the left. Could have been a fly ball.
Nancy Poprovsky. I'm dedicated to our city. Once upon a time, I attended a campaign event for the younger current mayor at Attorney Jim Razor's home. Things in our city were going fairly well in those days. I say fairly well because nothing is perfect. Have you ever talked to someone who tells you their life is fine, no problems? I'm not saying you should stand in Costco and shout out all your dirty laundry, but how do you truly know someone if they never reveal their bad times or mistakes? That's just it, you can't. Sadly, I'm experiencing at city meetings, when people bring up something negative happening in our city, they get ignored or accused of making it up, sometimes even gavelled. This year, after a resident finished their public comment, an official immediately countered what they said. I once read an adoption to Royal Oaks meetings rules of procedure. Public comments will not be answered or countered during this portion of the meeting. The official directly answered and countered the residents' comments and embarrassed them, not respectful. When someone asked for the official not to rebut, they were immediately gavelled. The official bullied the resident, and the resident must stay silent? This was not democratic, a case of power and superiority too quickly taken for an equal chance at democracy. Could you please amend these rules and add officials respecting the residents? What is good for the goose is good for the gander. We should all be respectful, tell the truth about what's happening in the city, good or bad. Greater respect will come from this. Please listen to this story. I got caught by my mom stealing candy at 5 years old. I got marched back to the store and had to apologize. When you screw up, you should own it. Yet, for whatever reason, many people won't apologize. Maybe it feels like an uncomfortable admission of guilt. In politics, people get advised not to say they're sorry, instead using more squirrely language to keep away blame. In America today, there is a perception saying you're sorry makes you look weak. Real strength is admitting we're flawed and learning from them. Saying I'm sorry is a superpower. These words can disarm angry people. It's also a way of extending your hand across great divides. It makes everyone feel respected and heard. Own your screw-ups. Forgive others theirs. That story was by Gretchen Whitmer. Thank you.
All right, who's next? Ms. Wagman? All right. Wasn't sure if you changed your mind.
You know me better. Okay. Janice Wagman. First, I'd like to make a couple suggestions. Number one, the agenda, I would like to see published earlier. I know this was brought up in previous meetings, but to have it published on a Friday afternoon is really not respectful of the public. And speaking of respect, I would like to have a change in the meeting procedures that telephones are not allowed up here for you to refer to, and computers and screens are not open. We spend time putting together our comments, and we expect people to pay attention, not look at their computers or their phones or what have you. I would really appreciate that. Okay. My number one thing is the new Agenda Center. A month ago, January 7th, I sent out an email to the city manager's office suggesting that there's some definite deficiencies in the new agenda center. What we have is now 3 places that if the public wants to find documentation or information, we now have to go to 3 places. One, the old archive, which only has meeting minutes. Secondly, the one that we had before the new system, and that at least has Boolean search terms where you can limit your results. And the new one, which I have yet to figure out how to search with it and get positive results. You can get all kinds of results or none. So if you want to look for John Doe, you're going to get everybody named John and everybody named Doe, and it could be anywhere. But you have to go into each one of those centers to find out the information. The old archive center has no minutes or no documents attached to it. So unless eScribe can tell you a different way to search in there so you can find things, it doesn't make sense to have all 3. I asked the city manager's office to get with eScribe. I've been part of I've been a major stakeholder in numerous system migrations. We always had users across the board testing out the system before it launched. And in this instance, I think what's happened is the manager's office and the city clerk and all the departments within the city may have tested it, but the public never got the chance, and it doesn't work for us. And I'm quite suspect that a lot of it doesn't work for you either. So, and the video is no longer in the agenda center. Another concern I have is the documents are now on an eScribe server. I don't know if we're backed up here, so if anything happens, do we lose those documents or whatever? Hopefully it's in the cloud and we'll be able to get it. So I would appreciate someone looking into this and making some adjustments or corrections or meeting with eScribe. We have they have a support in their contract, and I would appreciate that being taken care of.
No, that's just to help folks know when their time's up. Mr. Harrison. Lovely blue sweater tonight, sir.
I beg your pardon?
I like that blue sweater. Very nice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Bill Harrison, 2729 Trafford, Royal Oak, resident since 1941. Just going to piggyback on some of the things that others have said. Janice was talking about the agenda and the way to get to the agenda and previous meeting minutes. It's a disaster. Early on in my career, prior to 57 years with the architect and engineering business, I did a lot of programming. It was technical programming, but you never roll anything out without a beta test. It should be wrung out before it's offered to the public. Now, as far as Normandy is concerned, I drive down Normandy every morning to get to breakfast. And you've just installed the traffic calming. Why in the world would you install traffic calming and then increase the speed limit? It's counterproductive. And the lady that spoke about Sheets, I've been following what's going on with the Sheets fiasco. And I don't remember whether it was in this chamber with this group or whether it was planning, where they were talking about the master plan. And the folks that are working on the master plan were befuddled as to what to do with 14 Mile and Coolidge. In the first place, before the Sheets thing came along, that corner is a disaster because you have to jog to get underneath the viaduct, and it prevents normal changes in the path of Coolidge and 14 Mile because of the railroad track, and that's been brought up. there's another property on the east side of the railroad tracks where the tooling manufacturer, I can't remember, it's a French name, starts with a C. It's a large property, which if they're going to be in that neighborhood, that would be a far better property than, it's the one across the street from McDonald's. Far better than the old Ford Motor Company parts building. So I hope you folks see reason and turn them down for that specific location. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak tonight at public comment? Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to close public comment and bring the meeting back to this side of the table. Appreciate the public comment. It would be helpful if you could construct, for those that had concerns about the agenda e-scribe, this is new for everybody. So if you have some comments, I know Ms. Davids would be, I mean, I don't have a problem going in there and figuring it out, but that doesn't mean that I am the benchmark of, you know, what it should be. So if there are improvements we can make, I think we'll take a look at it and, you know, try to improve upon the process. I find some of the advancements that it offers to search by time and date and phrase and exact words and all that stuff by year are very helpful, but it may not be, you know, maybe I'm unique on an island, but I think that was helpful because we want to make sure that, you know, the whole point of the e-scribe was to make information more accessible to people, not less accessible. So, and then I think there were just some, again, I'm not in the business of correcting people, but I just want to make sure that when we talk about looking at our screens up here and phones and whatnot, I'll just say often we're taking notes in the notebook. We have all the agenda items up here. And sometimes when people come, even at public comment, they'll mention a property or whatever. I often go to Google Maps to see what they're talking about and try to understand. So I think these machines are very helpful to have a productive meeting. And I'll just say for cell phones, you know, I have sick parents. I got 3 kids, and I had a very sick wife at one point. And so if my wife texts me during this meeting and is having a problem, I will look at my phone and I will not turn my phone off because this job is really, really important, but my family is equally as important. So I hope you understand that sometimes when we look at cell phones, it's not to see what the score of the Michigan State game is. It's text from Nikki. Oh, okay, she's telling me what I have to do tomorrow. Not important. Or sometimes it could be something very serious, which unfortunately our families had to endure in the past. So I just want to make sure you understand, give people the benefit of the doubt. And we're all professionals up here, and you know, just an FYI there. And then just the correction on the master plan, the pictures that were brought up, there's no plan to take away those businesses. That's an illustration of what could be 50 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now. And the city does not have the wherewithal, the desire, or the authority to go in and close businesses, tear them up, and build some mystery buildings in those spots. So I just want to make sure when we talk about the master plan, it's a master plan. Just like in the master plan we had, you know, in the last one, industrial areas, and over the years those industrial areas turned to residential areas because it was a better use, and that's what the market demanded. So you got to look at the master plan for what it is and don't overinterpret a photo in the master plan. Read the language in it. So, okay. All right. But moving on, we have number 6 up tonight, which is the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull anything off the consent agenda tonight? None? It's been years.
Been years. Is everything okay down there? Just want to do a double look. Okay. All right. Does anyone make a motion to approve the consent agenda? Commissioner Colo? Move. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Douglas. Discussion on the consent agenda. All right. With none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. 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 Those opposed? Motion passes. All right. That brings us to item 7, which is the January 2025 Traffic Committee resolutions. City Engineer Donahue, the floor is yours.
Yes,
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. Tonight I have recommendations from the January 28th Traffic Committee meeting, and there are 4 proposed resolutions for you this evening. Our first item was a request to add dedicated left turn signals for north-south traffic on Coolidge Highway. This is at Meyer Drive, so that's illustrated here up on the screen. The study found that these signals would be warranted based on a higher crash history at this intersection. Unfortunately, we can't simply just throw in some left turn signals on that existing span wire. We'd either need to upgrade to a box span or a mast arm configuration in order to fit all the signals safely on that, in the intersection. However, we're planning to go after some highway safety improvement grant funding to upgrade this signal. So if we get that, we would be able to do this in 2027. If we do not receive grant funding, we'll still try and get it programmed into our capital improvement plan as funds are available, using some road millage dollars. So at this point, we're just asking for approval to move ahead with the signals when funding is available. The second item that we looked at was to review the speed limit on Normandy Road. This is between Coolidge and Crooks. So this was a commission resolution from our meeting from last September's Traffic Committee recommendations. At that time, we had compared the speed data that we had before traffic calming was installed on Normandy, and that was installed in 2023. And then we took a look at what speed data we had after the traffic calming was installed to see how beneficial it was. The speed data is up here on a table, so you can kind of compare what we had before and after. We did decrease the 85th percentile speed a little bit, but it was 1 to 3 miles per hour, not a real significant change there. Drivers are still well above the 25 mile per hour speed limit, and that indicates that perhaps 25 miles per hour is not appropriate for the corridor. So looking into this in a little more detail, Michigan law provides 2 methods for us to use when setting speed limits on roadways. The first method is the more simple method, and that's where we just look at the characteristics of the roadway environment to set the speed limit. What type of road is it, what type of neighborhood is it in, and how many access points are there along that corridor that could be conflict points. So if we use that method for this section of Normandy Road, we'd actually be looking at a speed limit of 45 miles an hour, which seems very high, and so obviously we wanted to take another look at that and use the second method that Michigan law allows. That's a more detailed analysis that uses the 85th percentile and the 50th percentile speeds, and uses an engineering study to evaluate safety concerns along the corridor. So using that method, the recommended speed limit here would be 30 miles an hour. Now, a common concern that we hear when talking about raising a speed limit is that it will cause speeders to drive even faster. Studies reviewed by city staff for areas such as this, so not rural environments, but actually a little bit more urban areas, have shown that changing the posted speed limit doesn't really change that 85th percentile speed. In general, the majority of drivers are going to continue driving the speeds that they're comfortable driving, regardless of what we sign the road to be. In addition to studying the speed here, we also found that there was a pattern of rear-end accidents for eastbound traffic here near Delamere Boulevard, which makes sense. As you head under the viaduct, there's limited sight distance, and you can't always see that people are stopped at that intersection. And so the committee is also recommending that we move the existing prepare to stop when flashing signs. So we have one of them out there right now, but it's a little bit further from the signal than it should be. So we're just recommending that we move it closer to the viaduct and also add a new warning sign as well, just so drivers get an extra heads up that there's a signal ahead. Okay, so that was all for Normandy. We can certainly answer questions and stuff at the end here. Our third item was to look at Gardenia Avenue. So this is a road that we're planning to resurface between Campbell and Stevenson in 2026. And so we wanted to evaluate the corridor to look at potential safety concerns, traffic issues, any multimodal opportunities that might exist, just to help define what our design goals are before we get into heavy design. We conducted a traffic study and found that the 85th percentile speed here is 33 miles per hour. This is a 25 mile per hour road. And the traffic volume here is roughly 3,500 vehicles per day. And there were no significant crash history patterns. The draft master plan currently recommends a pedestrian crosswalk in the middle of the corridor, right here at Kenwood, with the idea being that we would have better pedestrian access to Kenwood Park, which is to the south of this location. Staff is recommending, just based on the speed data that we had, actually putting 2 islands in. And there's like little bubbles here kind of showing one near Dorchester and one near Edgeworth, with the same idea, help people cross the road and have access to the park. But instead of one, we have 2 opportunities for that, as well as potentially slowing people down at a couple of points instead of just one point along the corridor there. We don't expect that this is going to significantly change driver behavior just based on what we saw on Normandy. We may lower the speed a little bit. I'm very doubtful that we'll get it down to 25 miles per hour just by putting these islands in. So similar to the previous item, we also looked at the speed limit using the 2 methods from Michigan law. In this case, using both methods results in a recommended speed limit of 30 miles per hour on the road here. And so the traffic committee is recommending that we move forward with design to include the pedestrian crossing islands and also to change the speed limit here to be 30 miles per hour. And then our final one, I don't have an image for it because it's pretty mundane, but we voted to update our bylaws so that we will have annual elections every January for our chair and our vice chair, just trying to make those consistent with all the other boards and committees. So they are recommending approval of that change and also nominated and voted to keep the current chair and vice chair in their positions for the rest of the year. So that's all I have for you.
Questions for Ms. Donahue? Commissioner Colo.
Okay, before we get into the speed limit, I do have a quick question just about the location of the sign, the be prepared to stop sign.
Yes.
And I guess more of the question is that something that you need to ask us for? That feels like a safety thing, the sign's approved. That feels like it should be, you should have the ability to do that administratively.
We could do it administratively. I think we wanted to point out that we looked at the crash history, that we saw some sort of trend and point that out. Sometimes signs like this, you can't move it and you have to spend $1,200 to put a new one in. And so it's kind of nice to have that backing. But yes, if there was a serious issue like that, we don't need to wait to go to traffic committee. We could just change that administratively.
Okay, because I remember like one of my first meetings, we had maybe a 3-hour conversation about a dead end sign on Pleasant, I think it was.
Before Commissioner Colo, that was a 3-minute conversation.
It was my first traffic meeting too. Okay, so then, so I just, as long as you feel empowered that you can make those changes, I don't think that needs to come to us unless commissioners disagree with that. But then when it comes to the speed limits themselves, I had the same feeling about both Gardenia and Normandy, that we should be looking at more ways to potentially slow this down. These are residential streets, and I do appreciate that the Michigan law is trying to tie our hands here. And I appreciate the staff's recommendation is based on Michigan law. Like, staff did exactly what they're supposed to do here. I'd be curious to see if there's other traffic calming we can use. I know that, for instance, on Normandy, driving down it, there's not a lot of trees in the easements. Adding more trees makes the road look smaller. We plant about 800 trees a year as a community as we continue to grow and expand our tree canopy. So that could be a really nice way, as we're planting these trees anyways, to target them. Where they're going to be a little bit deliberate about that. And then also, as I started cycling. I'm not a cyclist by any means, but I do like to ride my bike. And I've been yelled at by cars when I'm driving down Normandy who yell at me to get into the bike lane. Well, it's not a bike lane, it's a parking lane. And I don't know if that's well distinguished. So I wonder, we've talked about different ways to do this in the past. I wonder if we paint those parking spots as stalls. That's another visual cue that this is a parking lane, the road's a little bit smaller. And people, makes it a little safer for both cyclists and drivers might slow down because of that. So I think those could be some temporary solutions before we change the speed limit. Also in Normandy, I'm not thrilled about the fact that we'd go from 25 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour back to 25. I think they'll just create confusion. So I'd be curious to see if those could be some potential solutions we have to at least try before we raise speed limits.
Anybody else? Commissioner Macy?
I have a similar question about the speed limits that was asked about the signs. I mean, so state law sort of seems to tie your hands and I guess our hands. What happens if we do something else? Like, is state law, or is the chief going to come arrest us? Or like, what happens next?
I guess I would look to Mr. Grochowski for that answer.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Engineer Donahue's correct. There's two avenues under state law. One's a prima facie based on the nature of the road, how many entry points. And I think you did that in both these situations, and then did the actual engineering study with traffic engineering practices that provide an objective analysis of the characteristics of the highway and apply the 85th percentile. That state law does say must, so if you do the engineering study based on all those criteria, you must set that speed limit. But for that must, there is an exception, but that would be up to this board or the engineer to pull out those exceptions from that law where you can go below the 85th percentile, but not below the 50th percentile if there's a situation with hazards to the public that are not reflected in the 85th percentile speed. Hopefully that makes sense. So basically, yes, you can depart lower than the 85th, but not below the 50th, but you have to establish some sort of hazard to public safety. One of those could be the perceived hazard of going from 25 to 30 to 25. You know, so there's other observations you can take into consideration if you decide that you think it does, raising the speed limit would constitute whatever hazard you believe there might exist in that area.
Okay, that's very helpful. Who was the enforcer of it? Like, what if I set it at 15 miles per hour and then, like, does someone have to sue us to say, you know, you're disobeying state law here, or?
That's an interesting question. Never had that come up before. I mean, yeah, I guess somebody would have to do like an injunctive relief type of situation or some sort of equitable type of action to try to enforce either state law or something different if we depart from state law. But again, if you find demonstrative hazards to public safety, you know, it's not defined what that is. That could be relatively minor, and if you establish that, then I think you would survive any challenge.
Okay, so I like your answer, but it also partially answers my other question, which was, if in fact our hands are tied, why would she even have to bring that to us? Because if there's nothing she or we could do to make it different, but it sounds like there is something, and we could set it differently, and we don't want to leave our city engineer to be sued. If it would be better for us to make that decision and have it be on our be to us that they come rather than.
And obviously the language is there for a reason. There's the exception to the must, so they obviously intended that local traffic or local road authorities under the statute would have that necessary ability to depart from the 85th percentile if there's other present issues.
Okay, great. And then I'll just say, it's just in response to Commissioner Colo, I feel the same way about Normandy, that I think I'm not excited about bumping that speed limit up. At that point, I'd be interested if there's traffic calming. I was going to ask how long we have before we get arrested, but it sounds like we're not in immediate danger. But I don't actually feel the same about Gardenia, which is extremely close to where I live, and I travel on it fairly regularly, and I did not hear from either tonight or via email or from any of my neighbors any complaints about the raising of that speed limit. And I don't want to say that it's not the same kind of pedestrian atmosphere, but it sort of is not. Like, I like the idea of having that passageway to Kenwood Park because that's a nice thing to get across Gardenia for, but there's a lot of walkers in my neighborhood, but that's not one of the main corridors, and the houses are a little bit set back and not facing that street. So I feel okay about that one.
Commissioner Douglas and Commissioner Cheeseman.
A couple of things. There is some irony in the fact that one of the conditions that lets you apply the prima facie standard is driveways. And we've got two parks occupying a major stretch of this where, of course, there are no driveways, and yet there's pedestrian traffic, heavy pedestrian traffic, crossing over to get to those parks. So that example as a justification is, I think, unfair. We also don't look at cycling traffic, and while we don't have bike lanes here, there's an application called Strava that cyclists use, and they map areas as where they've traveled. And so over the period of about a year, the section from Woodward to, and we know that Strava is used by maybe 25% of cyclists, the kind of people who want to keep track of their cycling, right? So over the period of about a year from Woodward to Coolidge, there were 34,000 trips by 2,200 cyclists, and that's recorded. So you can infer that even more cyclists are using that, and our half-mile roads are like that. They're very desirable for cyclists because of the connections. And furthermore, from Crooks to Clawson, on the other side, you have 14,000 trips a year by 1,500 cyclists. And the only reason I hypothesize is that we don't have, that cyclists have not mapped or recorded traffic between Coolidge and Crooks is because so many of them cut down Benjamin. So, I mean, I think there are uses here, there are dangers that are not being recorded in the highway data, yet are there, but are still valid reasons for keeping the speed limit here at 25 miles an hour.
Commissioner Teasdale.
So I guess I'm not understanding one part of the way the law is written, though, because my understanding is even with those important considerations, we can't go below the 50th percentile, right? So we can't go down to 25, right? Other than just saying we're not going to follow the law, right? Okay. I mean, I'm in favor, I agree with, I think it sounds like most people up here that there probably some traffic calming makes sense on Normandy because then we can keep, if we keep it at 25 and we can hopefully get the traffic to travel in alignment with what we're trying to do, that makes sense. I guess a question I had for you was because there already is some traffic calming there, so do you have some recommendations of what that might look like if we're going to look at something beyond what Commissioner Colo has suggested?
Yeah, so we invested a pretty substantial amount of funding in 2023 to add traffic calming here. It's either 4 or 5 pedestrian islands that we added along the corridor to help with crossing points. To do something else here is another significant investment because we'd either be talking about moving the curbs inward and eliminating the parking lane or doing some sort of bump out chicane pattern where similar thing, you're bringing the curb in for parts of it and then potentially doing some underground sewer work to help with the drainage on the road. We could look at restriping as suggested. I'll agree, I don't often see a lot of people park there except for near Warden Park when there's all the soccer things going on, right? But that's not even this section of Normandy. We could look at that as an option, restriping it as a buffered bike lane or something instead of on-street parking. I do think that opens a whole new can of worms and something we'd want to get public engagement on and not just kind of jump to that conclusion right away. But I'll also say our results of traffic calming on major roads wasn't as great as we had hoped it would be, right? National studies tell us to do these things. We did them. They made a minor improvement, but I really don't see us getting this down to 25 miles an hour because that is not the comfortable rate of speed to drive on this road. If 50% of the drivers are already driving at 30 miles an hour, that's because it's comfortable to do so. So I think we would just be throwing money at this that maybe isn't going to have a real impact on the speeds. Brutal honesty, sorry.
Commissioner Colo.
You know, I appreciate that last comment. I think that's why maybe like adding trees, that's a longer investment, right? Like you're right, the road does not, people are comfortable traveling down the road because it looks like it should go faster. So maybe, you know, and without bringing in the curbs, because you're right, we also spent a lot of money on this, but adding more trees, changing, you know, making us stalls out of the bike or the park, I almost said bike lanes, out of the parking lanes, I think does try to change the feel of the road. Even potentially adding, you know, you mentioned chicanes. We went with that experiment on Lincoln of adding chicanes, or not chicanes, but bump outs to try to make the road feel small also. So I think, you know, at least in the meantime, we can experiment with this and see if it does work, if it does bring it down a little. Because I thought with the law also, we have an ability to try to change the speed limit too, to reset that 85th percentile.
Well, I mean, that would be like my argument. If we decided right now not to raise it, it would be because there is some legal concern about doing it, arbitrarily. But if you said, hey, look, our defense is we're putting other measures in there to see if it affects the speed and look at this differently, because there are these, demonstrative safety risks with folks crossing to get it from the neighborhoods to get into this gem of a park. And there's all these other things. And so there might be, at a minimum, a defense there, if not a way to, find room within the law. But I don't know. I would leave that to the city attorney to advise or not advise at his discretion to keep the most options on table. It's okay to stay quiet. Perfect. All right, Commissioner Douglas.
And I would just add to Commissioner Colo's idea of because driving down there, the parking lanes do look narrow. They don't, to your point, don't look like parking lanes. And so in addition to striping them across so that it establishes parking spaces, if we made those parking lanes a little bit fatter, again, then you have the visual perception that you've narrowed the traffic lanes, and that might contribute a little bit, and it's just paint.
Commissioner Cheatham?
I think I have a question for our city attorney. Can we table this, plant some trees, and revisit it in 15 years?
I mean, it's a great question.
Wait, it's postponed. Postponed indefinitely.
I'm not in violation.
Is it better to remain quiet?
I mean, you can postpone a matter indefinitely. That doesn't change the fact that you have an engineering traffic study done with a recommendation from your traffic committee, but doesn't mean you have to act on that. To even confuse things a little more, you've touched on another segment in 257-628 regarding where the design speed is lower than the limit determined under Section 5, the 85 percentile, where the road authority may post advisory signs. So really what that does is you keep the 25-mile-an-hour signs, but in reality, that becomes a challenge for the police to enforce that because they're just advisory signs, and the true speed limit, if set at 30 miles an hour per the traffic study, police wouldn't be enforcing anything for a violation unless it's at least over 30 miles an hour. So there's another kind of way to confuse you, sorry, with that, but you could even set the speed limit at 30 per the thing, but add to the motion to post the advisory signs at 25 miles an hour. That comes down to really a police enforcement issue at the end of the day, and that's part of that same statute with the 85th percentile.
And just to clarify, what does an advisory sign look like?
Well, for instance, if you've driven on country roads and your speed limit's 55 and you come to a curve and you see the curve sign and there's a little like 40 or 45 mile an hour, that's an advisory to safely take that curve. A majority of the time you can safely take that curve at speeds in excess of that suggested advisory sign. Having lived in the country, growing up in the country, driving a stick through those curves, I know that very well, and I think somebody else on this commission might as well.
Commissioner Colo.
Okay, I'm going to try and move this along a little. I'm going to make a motion on traffic item B to move the sign as advised, to leave Normandy at 25 miles per hour, to paint parking stalls, and to plant trees along the easement.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Colo. Is there a second? Okay, a second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion. Mr. Macy.
How many trees?
Plural.
Lots.
More than one.
Not 800, not all the trees.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, like, we have a certain amount set aside for tree planting in the city. Are you now diverting that entire amount? It's kind of a long stretch there.
As many as, what we can figure out in this program, but I think adding some to, I don't want to put a number on it, arbitrary number at the table, right?
Okay. And
I know we have CBDG funds that could probably be used for that also.
Allegedly.
don't count your chickens.
Well, we had.
And can I ask the city engineer, so we've been talking about trees up here, but I didn't hear you say anything about trees.
Trees are great. I don't have an issue planting them. I always want to look where are the power lines, what utilities are right under them. I don't want to put this over a brand new gas main. So I don't want to give the impression that we can automatically just throw a bunch of trees both sides of the road. There's probably some constraints to that. That said, I'm sure there's opportunities for more. I know along Normandy Oaks, there's that really nice big green belt that we can probably at least put some there. But without further looking, that's the best I can give you as an answer.
And does that crowding effect have the feeling that we think it would, that it makes you maybe?
I think over time, we're talking 50 years when they've really matured, but they will have an impact and a lot of other benefits as well.
All right. We don't know if Mr. McGee's grandkids are going to live here.
Could be.
We'll have to-
Working on that. I'll just add, I think it's a good motion on the surface because, we're just talking about trees that we'd probably like to plant anyways. We got the paving, the striping of parking spots to make sure they're wider and you're not going to lose anything with that. And ultimately what you're doing is you're reducing the speed to, or keeping the speed at 25 miles an hour. First off, I appreciate the work that our city engineer does and her team. They are faced with state statutes that have to look at these things in a very complicated way. Unfortunately, our state, if you look at Woodward, the state highway, that obviously is a key artery in our city, and even some of the issues we had with I-75 expansion and whatnot. There's some 1950s ideas still in the state that basically say, cities are designed around cars and not people. And we in Royal Oak take great pride in the fact that our community is designed for people and around people. We got a lot of gripe for Maine. We got a lot of gripe for Rochester. But what we're finding is these traffic calming measures, making our community more pedestrian friendly, given the fact that we have 50 plus parks. We got folks walking, cycling. Those numbers are amazing to me. And as much as you think it was me yelling at you, I definitely would have taken the opportunity, Commissioner Colo, but it was not me that yelled at you. I would have honked and scared you, but I wouldn't have yelled at you. But all joking aside, I agree with the neighbors here. Normandy it's a neighborhood. There's homes on Normandy. There's folks going in and out of the neighborhood that go to the park, that go to businesses along the Normandy corridor. And I think this particular stretch, people do drive fast. And again, this isn't maybe, scientific, but I'm inclined to believe, just my experience on the highway, that if you raise the speed limit from 65 to 75, allegedly some people might go 90 now when they always used to go 80, just, allegedly. But I think in this case too, people are always going to clip 5 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour more than the speed limit. I've always had an issue with this statute because this road would necessitate faster driving. I'm almost certain it would because, you probably get away with 7 miles an hour. I'm looking at the chief, I don't know, but, maybe 8. So if you increase it to 30, now people are going to go to 38 versus 34, almost. And it is an absolute scientific fact. The faster you go, the longer it takes you to stop, the less likely you're to see a pedestrian crossing the street. And, we've taken a lot of gruff up here over the years, putting safety first and putting pedestrians first. To the point where epic disruptions here in this room, I can remember on Rochester Road. But we did it because we want to make sure folks are safe, pedestrians are safe. So in this particular case, someone could sue us, could be an issue. I'd like to see us work on traffic calming. There's another suggestion here that we could do that I'd like to hear in this discussion part with my colleagues is we could actually kick it back to the city engineer saying we want to keep it at 25. You've been given some recommendations on trees and striping. but maybe she has some other ideas in terms of what we can do with chicanes and with other things as well. I just want to throw that out there. Maybe, I don't think these things are, if this motion passes, I don't think it's harmful, but I think that we might have an opportunity here to say, look, we want to preserve that 25 mile an hour. We understand that this park is growing in popularity. How do we maybe look at it more than what we suggested and see what she comes back with? Commissioner Colo?
So, Mr. Mayor, I wonder, could it be both? Paint is pretty cheap, and I think actually just the experiment of making stalls and a little bit wider parking would be interesting to see if that has any effect while we're also looking at other traffic calming. If it's adding chicanes, if they come up with that, or maybe it's turning the north parking into bike lanes instead of parking along the park, because the park is well served by the large lots that we have. So I wonder if it's maybe both to see, we could do something right now and then let the traffic committee, let the engineer look at this, ruminate on it a little bit more. So it's not one or the other, it's two options. And when it comes to trees, I'll just add, there is a power line that goes along the south side of Normandy Road. Last year, DPS figured out trees that they can plant underneath power lines, because previously we weren't offering easement trees in our residential program if you had a power line going through. And DPS worked with the nursery that we have to find trees that won't grow too tall to interfere with the power lines.
Now, I don't necessarily say it's bad logic, and I'm guilty as charged up here because I've said before over the years, it's just paint, we can see. But paint does have an expense, and the expense of that paint could actually fund a chicane, maybe, or part of one. I wouldn't want to put the city engineer on the spot, but I will ask, for this stretch, are we talking in the tens of thousands of dollars for paint, or in the handful of thousands of dollars for paint?
A handful of thousands.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better because you'll get some immediate utility out of it. So what I hear Commissioner Colo saying or offering up is you like the idea of kicking back to the city engineer to have additional ideas of affordable traffic calming there that will, control the speed, make it safer, get us out of this percentile discussion. On top of, hey, we're just planting trees and paint, you're never going to take the trees out, and the paint is only a few $1,000. And you might keep most of it. Okay. Any other questions? I'll go to Commissioner Douglas and Commissioner Macy.
So as much as I want to keep the speed on this stretch of road at 25 miles an hour, I think I'm going to vote against this motion. I don't think we should be putting our engineer in a position to have to defend something that is clearly not allowed by any interpretation of state law. If indeed we believe that changing paint, planting trees will help control that, I think that's what we're talking about here, moving the speed to 30 miles an hour, but hoping that some more definitive parking controls will help reduce that speed, then I think that's really our only option. So I will be voting against the motion, and then we'll happily come back with a motion to approve the 30 miles an hour with additional paint, planting trees, and of course moving that sign, which I think, or that warning sign, which I think we're all in agreement with.
Yeah, and I appreciate that argument. The only thing that I would think a little differently about it is that, if somebody comes to us and wants to waste their time saying nobody wants, in the city of Royal Oak, wants to increase the speed from 25 to 30, you guys refuse to do so. Now have some sort of injunction to say that you have to. There might be a de minimis cost to that order to defend it, but, okay, then that happens 6 months, months down the road, we might have more data to suggest that, speed limits are below 25 miles an hour at the 50th percentile because of these measures. Maybe not, but if they did, then it would be like, okay, well, we can demonstrate that there's a lot of pedestrians, we can demonstrate safety issues, as our city attorney said, and therefore now because people have slowed down a notch, 1 or 2 miles an hour, now we've been able to do below the 50th percentile, or I'm sorry, at the 50th percentile 25, with a new study. So that would be my only thought. Commissioner Macy?
So I somewhat agree with Commissioner Douglas on this, although the original motion didn't include anything about throwing it back to the city engineer. I mean, city engineer doesn't hide the ball from us. She would tell us if she thought there was traffic calming, and she just said 5 minutes ago that this traffic calming in these major streets has not been effective, and she feels like we'll be throwing money after it. And I worry the same that you do, that throwing this back with an indefinite time limit to her puts the burden on her shoulders to come up with a magical, cheap solution that doesn't exist. So I mean, I think we need to make a decision and have the accountability be on us. And I think if we're concerned about the fact that we are going against state law here, then we should do as was recommended by our council and be like, Chief, it's 30 miles an hour. Everybody who's driving there, please obey these 25 speed. I mean, we can put the advisory signs up, and that will apparently make us fall within the law if we're not enforcing it at the third. So I feel concerned about putting this back in her hands. It's been in her hands for 2 years. She's done a lot of stuff, and it just feels really unfair to be like, we haven't totally fixed this, but try something else. I don't know. Maybe she does have a magic solution, but I don't think she was keeping it from us.
Well, I mean, you could move the curbs and you could do all that, right? I mean, there is solutions. I mean, if you really narrowed that road, you would get the cars to slow down. If you put speed hump, I mean, you could spend an ungodly amount of money to do it. But I'm hoping the city engineer hears that there's a little bit of appetite from us to say that's okay. Like, maybe there's some cheap and easy ones that are in this motion right now, but, if there are other alternatives. And I think, I'm not saying that we're going against the law. I would say that we're recalibrating our study with some new information. So we did a study, and before we raise the speed limit, we want to make some changes to make sure that so I don't see us keeping the speed limit at 25 in direct violation of the law if we take action to put some parking in there and to put, at least in the short term, and then see if that changes the numbers. You know what I mean? And if we get to a point where we've tried everything and we're unwilling to spend $5 million, on this stretch of road, then, probably the advisory signs would be advisable. But I don't know that we're there yet. I think we can still take another bite at this apple. Commissioner Colo?
I think this body in the past has done exactly that. We're just trying to recalibrate, reset the 85th percentile speed. That's something, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is something we're allowed to do under the state law. We can reset it. But now we're adding more traffic on to get it again. If in a handful of years there's another petition that comes back and it's, everything we do doesn't work, then maybe it's time to, look at what the speed limits are. But, I think we're within the 50th percentile. From 28, you can round down to 25. But it's in intervals of 3. You can round down according to state law. So, I think we have an ability here to just make some additional improvements to see if it helps the situation.
Commissioner Cheatham?
So I honestly don't know exactly how I would vote, because I look at these numbers and I see it went, the 50th percentile went down 4 miles per hour, but then it went back up when people adjusted to the traffic calming measures that were there. Our city engineer is saying that they're only going to have modest effects. So I'm just not seeing that we're going to be able to get this down to where we want it to be. I think it sounds like we're in agreement that we want it to be 25, but we're just really struggling with how to fit that in with the law. I'm a little bit uncomfortable voting in favor of breaking the law. I'm not going to lie about that. That's not really aligned with how I try to operate. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, but I also really, care about the safety and the concerns of the community. So I like having some ideas about the striping, the trees. I also grew up in a rural area, so I'm very familiar with those signs. They are usually tagged to a curve or something like that. So I wonder if we can tag that onto the children crossing sign or something like that. So maybe a reminder that kids are crossing by the park might be helpful with the advisory sign. So I think I'm more aligned as I talk it out. I'm more aligned with the keeping at 30, but having the advisory to 25 with some sort of visual reminder of why we want it to be 25. And then doing the other measures to see if we can also get people's natural inclination to to reduce speed at least by a couple miles per hour. But I don't see us getting to the 25 with what we have here.
To be clear, I don't think there's any admission by those supporting this motion that we would be violating state law because we're taking another opportunity, just like we did in this opportunity. So now, if we just said keep it at 25 capriciously and arbitrarily without taking any additional steps to calm the traffic, then I would agree with you. But we're in this motion, we're taking steps to stripe and plant trees. So I just want to be clear for the record. I'm not challenging you. I just want, so the rest of us, if some of us vote for this motion, that, you know, there's always a difference of opinion, but for me, I think it's pretty clear. And if somebody disagrees, they'll let me know.
I don't see that my opinion, I don't think we can get down to that 25. So that just makes me really hesitant to support that.
Commissioner Hunt.
I don't think we can get down to the 25 either, but I always am skeptical of, increasing speeds, especially nowadays when, everybody's so distracted. This causes another danger that's on the road. So I never believe that speed limit should be increased unless it's the lodge that needs to go up beyond 55. But yeah, my concern listening to everyone was that there was this concern about flouting the state law, and I don't think that's necessarily what we're doing here. And I had a question for you. To the city attorney, given the motion that's on the table, and we're having these exceptions that we're putting in, the reasons why we're looking outside of this, the recommendation of 30. I know that there's been the discussion as to why it's important to keep the speed limit as is. Does that need to be a part of the motion, given that there's an exception that's given within the state law?
Well, the exception only gets you down to the 50th percentile.
Correct.
And that's the problem. We have traffic study that the 50th percentile doesn't get you down to 25 miles an hour. So even with the hazards to the public safety, I think the discussion has been it still isn't in line with the mandate under state law. So that didn't answer your question, though, did it? What was the question
It didn't,
again?
but I think I know where you're going with that. So making certain that there didn't need to be anything more within the motion to get us down to the 25.
And I think the discussion appropriately, it appears there's a lot of effort in maybe some was successful or it was successful for a certain amount of time to institute other traffic calming measures to ultimately get that 85th percentile or that 50th percentile down to that 25 mile an hour where you can set it. So I think the fact that you've discussed that's part of the motion. I think that we want to explore other avenues to lower those speeds to get into those percentiles so we're not necessarily going against the mandate under state law, I think is enough that you're probably fine. I mean, I think there's a practical aspect of it too, correct? Who's going to sue you to increase the speed limit on that type of residential street? But at the same time, you do want to do what the law says you're supposed to do. So, but I think the fact that you're adding stuff to try to get that percentile down probably gives you enough wiggle room to justify it.
I just know that there was the concern up here, and we know that people are litigious, so I just wanted to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to cover.
At the end of the day, if you take the other option that was suggested, that would still be a potential option as well, the advisory sign option I was mentioning.
All right, any other, Commissioner Macy?
So now I have a question. What is the motion on the table? Because you added some stuff to the motion and he kind of said, yeah.
No, the motion was to keep the speed limit at 25 miles per hour, but move forward with parking striping or widening the parking, whatever the stalls to make them more parking. That might include some widening at the engineer's discretion, but it definitely would carve them out. So the optics of that not being a
Okay. So it doesn't include the,
and
by the
trees.
way, do some more stuff instruction, or it does include
It does
that?
not include that at this moment.
Okay.
No.
And then, this is maybe now for Mr. Gutowski again. So does this mean that she has to come back to us sometime? If we're still not making the decision and just adding more traffic calming to try to get it down, are we saying now we want you to do a traffic study in October? What are we saying? I don't know. So just forever and ever, we're saying?
Well, I think that's what brought you here tonight, because it was some time ago, I forget
Well,
the
I
date.
know, that's what I'm saying.
And so it can be a vicious cycle, can it? So you're trying to break that cycle and have some definity, and
Can we even do this without saying that she has to go, that it's gonna come back to us? Like, can we just, because we're not making the decision, right?
Well, and part of the motion isn't to do that, so if the engineer doesn't do it, then the engineer doesn't do it. I don't see that she's been given direction yet by the commission to do another study, although you're trying to get that percentile down, so you're gonna wanna know that whatever measures are put in place that had an effect. Is that what I'm hearing? So, yeah,
Okay.
maybe more discussion is worthy.
Isn't it up?
Commissioner Colo?
I would imagine that'd be up to the engineering department administratively to figure out when they want to bring back another study. I don't think there's any direction that we need to give right now. The direction is, hey, let's try to slow it down some more, and then engineering can figure out when they want to determine if that's been slowed down enough, if, that we're in compliance and they want to do another study. I don't feel that we need to right now dictate to them, like, hey, in 6 months, we want to see another study, right? Like that, it seems, let's let the professionals do their jobs.
Yeah. Commissioner Douglas?
I have a quick question. Whose bright idea was this? Like, who said, oh, we need to speed things?
This came up in, I don't have the exact date, 2021, 2022. There's a lot of speeding on this road. It's a problem. Okay, let's take it. Should we change it to 30 miles an hour? That's what this tells. Nope, let's do traffic calming. Okay, let's invest a bunch of money and do traffic calming, and let's make sure it worked. Okay, it worked a little bit, but not quite what it should. And now my 50th percentile, wish I hadn't taken that study, but now it's telling me I don't have the appropriate speed limit out here. And so when we presented that to you it was our September traffic meeting. So in October, you would have heard from us. We said, this is what we found. Should we evaluate this and actually come back to you with a recommendation? And here we are with this. So
From our be careful what you wish for department.
I don't want to study this road anymore.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, so doesn't this leave it on your to-do list? Like, there's now a road, I don't know. If this motion passes, are you gonna be like, moving on with my life? Or are you just gonna be annoying you for the rest of the time until something's done?
It will not annoy me. No, I'll.
Okay, it's not gonna be hanging over your head.
Well,
I got bigger issues. So.
Yeah,
all right.
I don't want to speak for Holly, but I think if there's another major change to Normandy, let's say we, probably not in the next 4 months, 4 days, or 4 years, will we get any funding from the federal government, it sounds like. But let's say something came in and said, hey, you know what, we recognize that human beings are more important than automobile speeds. And there's this program out there that will allow us to take roads like Normandy and Gardenia and invest money in them to do some significant traffic. Then she would probably go back and do a study or something. You know what I mean? But I think unless there's an impetus, like we're repaving the road or we come up with some funding to do something really different that would be a slam dunk, cut the speed down. I think that not that I'm an engineer, but if I were the city engineer, I would think I'd have bigger fish to fry in the meantime. Commissioner Cheatham.
So just wanted to say, with all the discussion, I will support the motion because of some of the guidance that the city attorney gave us. I hope for the best with the reduction in speed. I'd like to see that.
Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. All right, so I'll just say, anytime the neighbors see those flaps on the roadway, just make sure you're driving 9 miles an hour to lower that median. Maybe take a few extra trips.
Back and back and.
All right, we took care of one of the 4. Commissioner Colo.
I move approval of resolutions 1 and 4. A and D. Okay. Yeah, they're numbered also.
Yes, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So let me just double check these.
That is the Meyer Drive
left
turn
turn
signal and
and the
bylaws.
Bylaws. Okay, we motion by Commissioner Cole. Is there a second? Second? By Commissioner Macy. Discussion. All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. All right. That brings us to Gardenia. Yeah, Gardenia. Well, I mean, it doesn't bring us anywhere because I don't make motions or I don't put things on the table, but it sounds like we have just the Gardenia question open.
I will move approval of the recommendation as presented.
We have a motion by Commissioner Macy. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Herzog. Discussion. I'll just add that I have a different opinion on our, I don't live as close to Gardenia, but I drive it quite a bit, and we walk through it and ride our bikes to get to, we used to get to Keller.
East of Campbell?
Yeah, you do the big loop. Go downtown, get some ice cream, drive back. Due to multiple steps. I'm just talking about Gardenia in general. So, again, I just don't have an inclination or desire to raise the speed limit on any of our streets because I do think it encourages people to drive faster, and I think it puts people at risk, and that is a fundamental value. As a matter of the question of the calculation, I don't fault the city engineer in any way whatsoever. She is doing her job professionally in the way she's supposed to do it. That's why these questions come to us in terms of taking that empirical information and understanding what it means and how it's translated into policy. And I think for me, with, you know, my own personal conscience, I can't do that. And I think that, you know, I'd like to see something similar to what we did on Normandy, but that's not the motion on the table, so I won't be supporting it. Commissioner Macy.
What would in your mind, the exception be in this case?
What do you mean the exception?
So if we're not going to follow state law, there has to be, we can not.
Oh, I would like to look at this further and see if there are other traffic calming measures. We could look at speed humps and things of that nature. Yeah, I do understand that. Commissioner Colo.
Following along the lines with the mayor said, I'd be interested to see what happens after, you know, Ms. Snyder discussed we're installing some pedestrian islands. So we're putting in traffic calming here also. So it seems it's kind of like the cart before the horse here, changing the speed limit and then doing traffic calming. I'd be more inclined just to leave it as is now and not make the same mistake we just made on Normandy and just like leave it, let the traffic calming go in, and if there's an issue, let someone come back with it.
Yeah, Kenwood Park.
Mistake you made like September of last year.
You're suggesting we instead make the exact same mistake, which is to put in traffic calming and then do another study to show that it didn't work.
I'm sorry, I meant the mistake we made in 21 of doing another study. I would put in the traffic calming and leave it as is.
Anybody else? Commissioner Cheatham?
Well, now I'm confused. I'm a little confused. So wait, so the motion on the table is this does include traffic calming, right? Like this does include it. So we're just not doing any study after. We're just not requesting any study. Is that what?
No, you're just raising the speed limit to 30
Yeah.
and putting the measures in.
Okay. I guess I got a little lost there. Okay.
Which seems a little crazy on the surface to me to say, hey, wouldn't you put the measures in and then check it out? But
So I'm sorry.
Commissioner Cole? Oh, sorry,
It's
Commissioner Douglas?
Just a rereading of the motion before we vote, please.
To approve the recommendation that came out of Traffic Committee,
Okay.
just straight up.
Okay, got it.
Commissioner Cole?
Yeah, so just so we're all clear, the recommendation out of the traffic committee is to incorporate pedestrian crossing improvements and also increase the speed limit to 30 miles per hour. If someone wanted, if there was a second to change the motion to only do pedestrian crossing improvements, I'd be more in favor of that and just leaving the speed limit as is for now.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Okay, I'll move that.
Well, there's a motion on the table already.
I'll move an amendment to the motion
Okay.
to change the motion to only incorporate pedestrian crossing improvements.
Is there a second to the amendment? Second by Commissioner Hunt. All right, any discussion on the amendment? It's pretty clear. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So that basically takes the motion to go forward with.
No.
Oh, all those opposed?
No.
Okay, how many noes do we have? 2? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I counted the ayes and I didn't do the noes. You're right. So that basically makes the motion now the recommendation less. So basically, it's just to put in the pedestrian improvements and keep the speed limit at 25 is basically where it's at now.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Macy?
So I guess just a question for the commission. So is the engineer ever able to bring us a speed increase, or are we just going to vote it down regardless? Like, is there ever a time, like, is there any purpose for her bringing it to us?
Well, I'll ask the other question. Is there any point of us, if we're just going to rubber stamp everything that a study says?
Well, I asked that actually earlier. I was saying, if by state law we're required to do it, why do we even have to vote on it? And I think the answer is because we can make exceptions. We can choose to
Exactly.
make an exception for a stated reason, but instead we're not addressing the issue, putting in traffic calming, but not planning to ever look at it again.
Well, I don't know that we're not saying don't ever look at it again. What we're saying in this particular case is that we're putting in the traffic calming, which in a way negates the study, in my opinion, that we have.
Did anyone
because
see the chart that she had up there for Normandy?
we're talking about Gardenia.
My mistake.
So for Gardenia, I agree with Commissioner Colo. I'd like to see, not like to see, but I think the impact of these pedestrian improvements will slow traffic down. Commissioner Douglas?
Despite the fact that Ms. Donahue said as part of her presentation that in the places where we have installed traffic islands, it hasn't worked. Just, it's kind of on the record here.
It's worked a little. She didn't say it didn't work. Commissioner Cheatham?
So just a couple thoughts. I mean, I think one reason that supports putting the traffic calming on and wanting to have a lower speed limit is because there is a very large apartment complex just north of Gardenia, and the park is south of Gardenia. And so I think that, downtown is south of Gardenia, so I think that there could be a lot of pedestrian traffic. I do also think that driving down that road recently, it's pretty rough. And I used to live on Gardenia, but a different section of Gardenia, and it was very rough, and then we paved it, and traffic increased speed with the paving. So I think we might end up just kind of landing where we are now anyway, because we're going to improve the quality of the road, but we're going to put traffic calming in. So I'm not quite sure that I'm not sure we'll see a lot of movement on that.
Yeah, but when you increase the speed limit, you take away the ability to enforce, which is also a medium to keep drivers driving slower. Not that we're trying to enforce traffic at every corner, every minute of every day. And there is when they see the 30 mile an hour speed sign, the default is, for a lot of people, at least over the median, 35, 40 miles an hour. And when it's 25, the default is 30 to 35 miles an hour. So and you guys can break at me all the time about, if it's scientific or not, but to me, logically, what I've seen happen is you put a higher number, people aren't going to say, oh, thank God it's 30. I've been driving 32 this whole time. Whew, dodged a lot of tickets. They're going to say, oh, it's 30? I'm late for yoga class. I'm going to go 36 now. So to me, fundamentally, we don't have to argue about it, but fundamentally, I think keeping the speed limit at 25 is the safest thing to do. I feel we have justification to do it in this case on Gardenia, and that's just the sword I'm going to stand on. Commissioner Douglas.
Just very briefly, pedestrian islands may not be enormous traffic slowing down things, but they are important for pedestrian access to the street. So I don't want to be throwing those under the bus just because they have a minor impact on traffic speeds when they have a major impact on pedestrian access.
Well, and they actually slow down traffic where pedestrians should be crossing.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it might not, but then people speed up. Then we also know pedestrians cross where, they're not supposed to either, and other intersections and things like that where these aren't, so.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else on this one? Call for the vote, all's in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No?
One no, okay. The ayes have it. All right. Oh my gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Gardenia, Normandy, and then the two middle ones that were unanimous without discussion. We're done on these, right? Okay. All right. Anything that anyone wishes to bring up for the benefit of our community? If not, we can entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Hunt makes the motion enthusiastically. Is there a second? We have a second by Commissioner Herzog, a little bit more enthusiastically. All right, any discussion on this important motion? I sense you guys want me to speed up this motion. All right, I'll go 5 miles an hour faster on this one. All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned.